Can you hear me now? Yes. Yay! Hi everyone. Okay, so the City Council Committee on Community and Economic Development, co-hosted with the Committee of the Whole, will meet in the Community Life Center on February 27, 2024 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matters below. Haunted Happenings 2023 issues and debriefing at 6 p.m. Notice of this meeting was posted on January 28, 2024 at 12:38 p.m. As you see, we're meeting at the Community Life Center. We also have Zoom attendance available if technologically feasible, and SATV is also here helping us with broadcasting and recording this meeting this evening. Thank you all for attending. We have from the Committee on Community and Economic Development in attendance. Sorry. I'm pausing.
Recording in progress.
I'm just going to read that again. The City Council Committee on Community and Economic Development, co-hosted with the Committee of the Whole, will meet in Council Chambers on February 20. Will meet in the Community Life Center on February 27, 2024 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing Haunted Happenings 2023 issues and debriefing. Notice of this meeting was posted on January 28, 2024 at 12:38 p.m. In attendance from the Community and Economic Development Committee, we have myself, we have Councilor Harvey, Councilor Davis, Councilor Morella, and Councilor Jerusalem. We also have from the Committee of the Whole, Councilor Marcillo, Councilor Cohen, Councilor Watsonfeld, Councilor Merkel, Councilor Hepworth, and Councilor Franzewski. Full house tonight. Thank you everyone for attending. We also have from the City of Salem, we have Mayor Pangallo, Chief of Staff Lisa Peterson, and a whole slew. I'm looking out. I'm going to try to name everyone, but I'm sure I will miss a few, so pre-apologies for that. But thank you everyone for showing up tonight to provide your feedback. We have the Chief of Police, Lucas Miller, here with us. We have from Destination Salem, Karen McLaughlin. We have the Fire Marshal. Assistant Deputy Chief, Peter Baldwin, thank you. We have Deputy Finance Director Anna Friedman from Parks and Rec, Trish O'Brien, the City Solicitor Beth Bernard, DPW Director Ray Jordan. We have the Health Agent Dave Greenbaum. We have the Director, another Dave. We have the Director of Parking and Traffic, Dave Karczewski. And my eyesight gets worse after that. And we have our new Director of Event Planning, Jeremy Fish. Thank you. And am I missing anyone back there?
TPS.
Right.
She said.
I said right. How could I forget right? So thank you all for joining. We also, I'm glad that we are having this meeting here in this room. This is a regular council meeting that we normally hold in our chambers, but I like the ability to have this many people here for this discussion. That is a really important one. We had our first debrief last year that I thought had a lot of great feedback and information provided, so I know a lot of us are looking forward to this meeting this evening as well. On that note, we have a lot of information for us this evening that was piled together by the Mayor's office and will be presented to us this evening. So it will be presented on Zoom, and I'm going to try to share it up there as well. Hopefully that works for all of us. So thank you for putting all the information together. I think it's best if we dive right into it, and then we can get to questions from the committee, and then hopefully we will have some time for questions from the public as well. I know there's a lot of information tonight, so I'm going to pass it right on to the Mayor Pangallo. Thank you. You might need to hold it down.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to also mute this. And for people at home, I'm going to share screen with you as soon as we can see it. So please bear with me for the presentation. So first of all, I want to say happy 217 days to October 1st. Thank you very much for I also want to acknowledge and thank all the city staff that are here who took time to help assemble a lot of the data that you saw, you're going to see this evening, and work year round. We do have meetings all year round, prepare for October. It's something that we treat as a planned special event that we can see coming. So we do have monthly meetings, which kind of grow in complexity and length as you get closer and closer to October. But so I'm grateful for all the staff that take the time to participate in those meetings and that planning for a city of 45,000 people to be able to welcome over 1 million people every October, and to do so in the manner that we have, I think is something that we should all be really proud of. So I'm grateful for the work that you all do, and I'm also grateful for the partners in the community who help make it happen, and also to the residents who are patient and hopefully able to enjoy the festivities and everything that it does bring to us. So for today's presentation, we are going to get the agenda. We're going to have an update from Destination Salem around our visitation numbers for this year and marketing. There we go. We'll review the finances for haunted happenings and as we're able to track them, the direct expenses to the city and the direct revenues that are derived from the activities. And as we get into that portion, I just want to remind people that those revenues are direct revenues to the city. So we're talking about things like parking receipts and the like. It doesn't include revenues to our businesses and to our local economy generally. Public safety update, both from the police department and fire department. We'll share some data about our community feedback. We do an annual resident survey. Destination Salem runs an annual business survey, so we'll share some of the highlights from those surveys. And then kind of close by talking about some of the things we're working on for the future, either for this coming year or for the years out from now, but kind of the pain points where we've heard a lot of feedback and we think there's a lot of room to improve and growth. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Para from Destination Salem to talk a little bit about visitation.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm going to go backwards and go marketing and then visitation. I want to first just say a word about Destination Salem in general. So Destination Salem's mission is to cooperatively market, promote, and manage tourism in Salem. We advocate for the kind of tourism that improves the quality of life for Salem residents and provides the greatest economic benefit to Salem's taxpayers. When it comes to marketing and promoting, most of our efforts focus on marketing Salem as a year-round destination. And our goal is to get high-end tourists to come here. The way we do that, we do a number of things. We publish a visitor's guide. This is our most recent one that we just published, just kind of hot off the press. And Steve Cooper brought lots of them, if anybody who's interested in gathering them. We also maintain the Salem.org website. We utilize a variety of social media channels, and we place ads in print, radio, television, and other outlets. When it comes to haunted happenings, our approach is different. We know that people are coming here no matter what, so we don't have to focus a lot of effort on enticing them to come. So instead, we really try more to influence their behavior. We do publish a guide, but this is mostly so that people know what they can do when they get here. We don't really place ads and things like that the way we do with our year-round marketing. Instead, our press releases and our other efforts really are on public service announcements. Things like, how do you get here? You should take your broom or take the public transportation, and also just kind of how to behave. So that's mostly what I have to say about marketing. And sorry, did that go up? Okay, there we go. So on the right here, on the right of the slide, you can see an example of one of our public service announcements. That's the type of work we do for marketing in October. As for visitation, in 2019, we began utilizing a research service called Placer AI, and it uses cell phone data and credit card transaction data to track the movement of people. And I know that sounds kind of creepy, but it's not individualized in any way, so it's anonymous. What you see here is on the chart are the results of that data collection. But the blue line there represents the number of visitors that came to Salem, Visitors is defined as somebody that came from more than 50 miles away or stayed overnight in one of our hotels or B&Bs. The number of visits is higher because some people come to Salem more than once in a month. So you can see in 2019, that's kind of when we began tracking this data, we had about 700,000 visitors and 900,000 visits. Those numbers dipped in 2020, obviously because of COVID, but people still came. They came here no matter what, and they came here in spite of the fact that year we actively told people not to come. We saw that some revenge tourism in the following years that peaked in 2022 with 900,000 visitors and 1.2 million visits. This past year, those numbers started trending down slightly, but was still higher than 2019 with between 800 and 900,000 visitors and 1.1 million visits. Any questions? Do we have any questions for me?
Just a quick question. It's 50 miles or more, so that doesn't include.
Hi,
I'm sorry.
oh goodness. Can you hear me?
No.
How about now? Okay, thanks. So the way we'll run through this, I'm sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. We'll have, if we'd like to pause after each department and ask for questions from the council, we'll do that. So if there are any questions from the committee or the council for Ms. McLaughlin on Destination Salem? Okay. And then up next, I believe, was finances. So Ms. Friedman, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna Friedman, I'm the city's finance director. I just have a couple slides to touch on related to, as the mayor noted, revenues that come directly into the city of Salem. Let me see if I can figure out. Perfect. Okay. So this first slide focuses directly on expenses and revenues for October 2023. The table on the left side, those are the expenses. The table on the right, those are the revenues. I am noting on the right side that those revenues are directly in October. On the left, there may be some expenses there that are late September expenses. This is one area where, as sort of haunted happenings sort of grows beyond maybe just the month of October, we're having to kind of think about this a little bit differently, potentially for future presentations, because we're having some creep, I guess I would say, on expenditures. So just to quickly run through the type of expenses we're talking about: public safety overtime, details, police and fire. That was around $405,000 for this past October. Public works overtime and expenses. Those not in addition to the overtime that includes things like fuel, signage, trash sweeping, barriers for crowd control. Portable toilets, this has become one of our main expenses. I put some comparison notes for just sort of the first year post-COVID of how that has grown just over the past couple of years. So over $84,000 in portable toilet expenses in the past year. Shuttle buses, $48,000. This has gone up. It's been an area of focus for the community to try to reduce traffic. Entertainment expenses and fireworks, that's been fairly standard year over year. Expenses at some of our particular destinations, Pirate Village, Witch House, those are typically fairly level year over year. Health department inspections and food truck expenses, around $8,400 this past year. Parking signage, $3,850. And miscellaneous, these just include some decorative purchases that the city might make. And then revenues that are directly related to sort of haunted happenings activities. So for things like licensing vendors, we collected over $80,000. Parking, lots and meters. So just to give an example of how to figure out what parking is, haunted happenings related parking, because we have parking around. So we use October collections less than monthly average from the prior year. So it's not exact, but it's as close as we're able to sort of get to say this may be sort of like that bump from the additional visitors that are taking their cars to visit. So that's just under $136,000 for this past October. And then those are for the lots and the meters, and then for the parking garage, almost $400,000. So we did have healthy collections from parking this year. Pirate Village and Witch House, around $46,000. We do something similar there where we kind of look at collections, because those sites do take in revenue other months of the year, we look at an average and sort of back out and get what that Halloween sort of bump is. Vendor health inspection fees over $5,500, and then the single service food vendor, the single service, he has to show single service vendor $64,000. That's for contract, that was up to bid. Food truck festival, over $17,800, and the miscellaneous, these are for things like fire permits. So in total, on the revenue side, we take in that are sort of very direct, like supporting the haunted happenings efforts, sort of setting maybe parking aside, because that's, we believe, sort of a direct revenue. $744,169, and then on the expense side, which I forgot to mention the total, just under $660,000. And then if I move to the next slide, just to give you some context for like what does all that mean. So this is a historical sort of expense versus revenue table going back all the way to fiscal year 08. And a couple things I'll point out. The FY19 is an outlier. I'm trying to figure out why that bumped up so much. I think it was because one of the revenues was put in as like the full month and didn't back out where we do like that average comparison. So I don't, for future years, I will try to correct that once I can figure out exactly how to fix it, but it was reported that year, and I do think that's not quite right. But as you can see, years prior to COVID, there was a healthy sort of gap between those direct revenues that I referenced on the prior page compared to the expenses. Since COVID, and once I fix that, hopefully that gap in 2019, we'll have a little bit more accurate picture for that year just before COVID. But since COVID, the revenues, that gap between the revenues and expenses has got much thinner. And just as a note at the bottom, there's a footnote. This does not include meals and room excise revenues, which we'll talk about in a minute, but these are those revenues that I mentioned on the previous slide. But just wanted to give you a historical perspective of how the city's expenses have been growing and how revenues have been growing as they compare to each other. And then on the next slide, this is sort of looking at that, but just a little bit differently. So that's taking that gap between the revenues and the expenses, and it's sort of showing you a trend for that in a different way. And so as you can see, it's sort of plotting how much sort of surplus, I would say, between the expenses and the revenues the city is seeing over time, and that is on a downward trajectory. We have kind of stabilized maybe the past couple of years, but as our expenses have been rising, the expenses have been rising at a much faster rate than the revenues have been, just for those very specific expenses and revenues that I opened with. And then just moving to the meals and rooms. So this is to give folks an overview for the past several years, the quarterly distribution. So we get, and I can maybe back up with some more background on this. So meals excise taxes. The city has a local option on meal sales where we collect 0.75%, so less than 1%, on sort of meals sold in the city, which is in addition to the 6.25% that the state collects. So when you're looking at the revenues there, that's just the city's distribution that we get from the state. We get those quarterly, and so these are a little bit harder for us to kind of parse out like we do for those other revenues like parking, because we don't necessarily have full insight into what these look like on a monthly basis. We ask DUR, sometimes we get some breakdowns, sometimes we don't. So this is a full quarter, October, November, December. And additionally, rooms, which I should have also mentioned, the local option there is 6%, which is in addition to what the state rooms excise as well. And so what you're seeing there is a 6% that comes to the city. So looking back a couple of years for meals and rooms excise, just wanted to note there's a couple footnotes here to give context on a couple things that affect this came online. This also includes, we collect room excise for short-term rentals, so it's not just hotel rooms, it's also short-term rentals. So the short-term rentals ordinance, I believe went into effect September of 2018. It was amended a couple times, which I know there, 2021 and 2022. So the short-term rental collections is in effect for all of these collections. And then the Hampton Inn, so new rooms came online in spring of 2022, so you would start to see those collections as in FY23 and FY24. But this shows, I'm happy to go through these numbers in more detail, but as you can see, we've had healthy growth in these numbers, but again, it's hard just to sort of demonstrate which are specifically October and which are December. And there's also, should we look at September, because that's on here as well. And one other data point that's on here that I thought might be helpful to know, short-term rental collections were 23% of rooms excised for this year, for the quarter October to December. Interestingly enough, they were 40% of the first quarter of this year. So a little bit down. I don't have data from the prior year, but I can ask for that, and I can regularly inquire with DOR to provide us that, so we can keep an eye on what that distribution looks like. And I believe that's what I have for finances report. Happy to take any questions on any of that.
Okay, I think I got the mic going, right? So we will have some questions from the committee, definitely. I will start with my quick question that I emailed you earlier. We can definitely see the expenses start to rise. There's a clear trend. It was kind of flat for a good 7 years, and then 2018 it started to go up. You touched on a few items, like what happened? Why did those expenses start to go up? Was there any one category that jumped out at you for the rising of the expenses since 2018?
Sure, and I actually just kind of grab my notes.
Sure.
So I did go back and look, we haven't done a full analysis by every single category, but if I look just at some of our larger categories, going back, say, the last 6 to 7 years, sort of the public safety overtime has certainly increased. I know it would be out of my wheelhouse to talk about why, but I would maybe wager a guess that maybe some crowd enforcement sort of strategies are at play there. Defer to the chief on that. Portable toilets, as I mentioned, if you look at FY17, we spent $19,000, a little over $19,000, and those are now over $84,000. In shuttles, that was very minimal in like FY17, FY18, FY19, and now, again, that's up to almost $50,000. And so there have been sort of some embedded kind of policy to sort of be responsive to crowd control. I think it's baked in there that are driving some of those costs.
Thank you. And then I just had one other question on the meals and hotel tax. Just clarifying the data that's presented to us. So this is just the total for the quarter?
Yes, correct.
If you were looking at the whole year broken down by quarterly, how much of a spike is this quarter?
That's a good question. I think it varies year to year. I have to do some deeper analysis on that. I think it is clearly our strongest quarter, but how that compares to the other quarters in terms of an average kind of spike, I have to do additional analysis on that.
Just curious. Thank you. And I'm our only mic, so I'm just going to pass it down. Okay, thanks. Councilor.
Thank you, Jim. A big jump in shuttle buses, which I find very exciting. Is there any kind of information or observations about, did that help us with congestion? How much did it help us? And going forward, is that something we could hopefully see bump again if it continues to be very helpful, if there's a lot of demand for that?
Might defer to the mayor of David. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be more information on that.
All right, thank you, Chair Snott, through you to our finance director or whatever department that can answer this. I had a question about the health department inspections and food truck expenditures, in contrast to our vendor health fees. I know it says that when it comes to the inspections and the food truck expenses, they're kind of baked into 8,400. Is there a delineation between that weekend event with that expense and when it comes to food, just health inspections as well? I should anyone to answer that.
I'm not sure what you mean.
So, is there any delineation between the health department inspections and the food truck expenses? Because I know it's in the same line item that I see. I know that when it comes to inspections, it's all encompassing all inspections when it comes to if you have food shows, obviously the day-to-day business. If you don't have a question, you can totally take it offline with you. That's fine.
I may have that broken out differently because I had rolled up some of the categories together so that the slide wasn't too overly busy. But David could look at that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Just there might be something there that's not, he might have reported it right to me and I might have combined something.
Hi, thank you. Anna, you did mention that looking at September, the costs, because I know it's probably a lot of police details on the weekends, especially with traffic details. And also where they extended it into haunted happenings into November. why aren't they looking at the numbers, what it causes in, costs in November?
We may have some of those because I know that those types of overtime costs get tracked at the department level by happenings category. So I am thinking that when the departments reported those numbers, they were including any overtime that was considered related to haunted happenings, but then that may have creeped a little bit on either end of October, the beginning or the end. But we can definitely check that just to confirm. And it's something as we were rolling up expenses this year, I was thinking, oh, in the past, this maybe wasn't as much of a consideration. It might have been like very nominal, but it could be becoming more material. And so we might need to think about how we present that in the future if we're seeing substantially more costs in September and November.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, my comments are similar. I think just getting a better sense of all of the income and expenses from, I would say, in August, July. I think we may want to consider on happenings in this meeting every year. I think should continue to happen. I also think that from a tourism perspective, it would be great to have a holistic understanding of the impact on an annual basis. I know that there's not a lot of additional public safety expenses and the like, but we know that there are meals taxes, right? We know that there are meals and rooms excise coming in. I would love to have an understanding of how Salem is trending on an annual basis, especially because we are physically experiencing a lot of year-round activity, which is great for the city. I'd love to just be able to better understand it. So in addition to extending the on happenings conversation into September and November, we could talk about what maybe makes sense and is appropriate. Just having maybe another opportunity to understand annually the impact of tourism and how it's growing. Thanks. And I have a lot of shuttle questions, Dave, for when the time comes. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Scott. Now being a member of the committee, for Ms. Friedman, through you from Ms. Friedman. So these are, and thank you for the presentation. Everything is always very informative, and it's really helpful to look at all these numbers. As far as, the revenue, these are the tangible revenues, that can be measured specifically. I was wondering if you could speak to some of the less tangible, financial benefits. We all know that this haunted happenings keeps, restaurants, businesses, it can be, 40% of what they make all year. But if you can give any perspective or touch on that as well, your opinion on, what, financial benefits that we don't see as clearly in this picture, if there's any, that you'd like to speak to.
I wouldn't be able to speak too much on sort of the broader economic piece. I guess what I could say is that looking at the meals and rooms slide, I just paid attention to that. But as you see the growth occurring for what the city is taking in, like those are percentage of sales that are occurring in our community. And so as that growth as the city is receiving additional funding from that, so too are local businesses. And so I think that's a sort of helpful perspective, and that's the only one I really have a ton of insight in from my role. But I think it really is showing sort of the growth that we're seeing in the city in those areas. And I would just note for folks that are very interested in this data is available online. The DOR publishes this. I could send the link around to the council, but for anyone else listening, I don't know off the top of my head, but if you, in your favorite search engine, DOR quarterly meals and rooms excise, it should pop up a link for you. You can go in and pull up the data. You can see all of the cities and towns in the Commonwealth. If you are into data, comparing how we look with other communities, just look up still. It's totally available for them. It gets published, like I said, every quarter. So usually like end of January, you would see for the quarter that we're talking about here.
And I'll say thank you again. I think this is something people have been asking for years, to see data this clear and this open and transparent for the last 2 years. We've had an opportunity to see it. We all really appreciate the work that you put into this. The Fiesta contract revenue that we had up there was $64,000. That seemed, I guess in my mind, it seemed a little bit low. I assume the answer is probably no, but do they report their revenues that they make in these locations?
I believe, I should check this before tonight, but I believe that there is a calculation that we get that kind of determines what the fees are that we collect. I have to look, I'm not sure, Jeremy and I might need to go back and check our notes on that from the great notes that Ellen left for us, but off the top of my head, I can't recall exactly how those are generated, but I do believe that there's a calculation so that we can confirm that what comes in that they report on, and we get like a percentage, and then those get calculated.
So that contract is, so $64,000 includes a portion of the revenues that they.
As far as I know, I want to double check I haven't refreshed my mind on that a little bit, but there is, as far as I know, off the top of my head, I believe that there's a consideration that we have to get a percentage.
Okay, and I would say that, I guess, from my perspective, the impact that, I think the impact that Fiesta has on that location versus the benefit of the $64,000 seems unaligned to me, and I would be interested to know, this is not from you, but from somebody else in the city, be interested to know if there's something else that we can look at, either supporting local vendors or spreading them out or finding a different location, because that is a prime location to only get $64,000 does seem low in my mind. And I'll just echo Councilor Merkel's comments around the unseen revenues. I think that it is somewhat deceiving to look up there and see those two bars are very close together and feel very concerning. But what haunted happenings means to our local businesses versus and what our businesses mean to us, I think that is very, very difficult to quantify. What a full downtown, what a thriving downtown looks like versus if we didn't have haunted happenings and what that would look like. So I'll just remind all of us that there's a much bigger picture here to look at.
Thank you. The company that tracks the visitors, is that just for October or is that year-round for sale?
Place Marianne?
Sorry?
Yes.
No, so the Place Your AI is available all year round. You can.
Right, so I think my comment would be that we look at October as being the Halloween season, but it gets earlier every year. We get more and more tourists earlier in the year. I remember the former chief was saying that it seems like haunted happenings is beginning in July. And I think it would be nice if we had a trend, we could see a trend of what the visitors are between January, for the whole year from January to December, and we could see the effect of the influx of tourists that come in September and the impact that those costs have to the city in September, maybe even as early as August. It would just be nice to see the graph. It'd be nice to see how low our impact is during January, February, March, and be able to see the year as a whole instead of just October, because even though this is good information, I don't think it reflects exactly what haunted happenings or what the draw is for the whole city and the impact on our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Salonis. I will note too that we just had Laser David who presented to us on the Salem Swiss Week Festival that just came in, which had, I want to say over 100 or 200,000 visitors for the weekend, which was, yeah, really interesting. So we do have that definitely available to us. And also a note that this meeting specifically is for the haunted happenings, hence October, fall. So we're looking at the specific revenues, but Kate Fox's comments are in the back of my brain right now about the overall impact of tourism in the region, not just in Salem, for seasonality effects as well. Any other questions from the council? Did you have?
Thank you, Chair. Can you just go over those short-term rental numbers that you stated?
Yes, absolutely. So short-term rentals account for 23% of the rooms size for the October to December. So I need to print out the exact, but so 23% of the $952,039. So and then it would 40% of the July through September revenue, which isn't reported here, but I can get that for you. And then, like I said, I'll keep checking in with DOR periodically so that we can just use that as a data point so the city is aware of how that looks. And apologies. One other thing that we started collecting, well, this isn't necessarily not happenings related, but there was also the 3% short-term rental community impact fee, which is just coming along this year. So I have some data to report to the council on that. The short-term rental community impact fee also came online this year. That should not be in there, but I might need to double check that that gets recorded separately, that's not in there. I have one other thing I neglected to mention. This may be of interest to folks. I had intended to put a footnote on the first slide that compares the expenses and the revenues. At the bottom of the revenues, what's not included in there are payments that are made by folks that are using the space on the common. And so we did collectively around $10,000. So that goes into a receipts reserve fund that is for the maintenance of the Salem Common. So there were additional revenues that were collected for that very specific purpose that I need to add a footnote for the future on this slide.
Thank you.
So while we have this up, I just want to expand on the point that Councilman Howard made about the additional revenues and the benefits to the community. There are also additional costs. So I'll point out that the public safety and public works expenses that are reported here are overtime expenses. And during the month of October, regular hours, city employees, public works, public safety, health department, building department, my office, every office really, is engaged in the work of managing the impacts and supporting this economy here. So while the overtime costs may have been $405,000 for public safety, if we also consider that a fraction, even just a fraction of the millions of dollars we spend on salary that month is directed towards something during the work hours of the day, you can see that the expenses to the city for managing this economy are significant. It's one of the reasons we think looking at the meals and lodging excise is important, because that is revenue we also consider supporting operations that are essential to making sure October is conducted safely. I think the next presentation is
Your favorite topic.
which should be brief.
Traffic and parking. So up next we have David Kerchowski, the Director of Traffic and Parking.
Thank you, everyone. David Kerchowski, Traffic and Parking Director. I'm going to show you a few slides. This is part of a larger presentation that I actually gave to the Traffic and Parking Commission this past December. So if anyone's interested, that full presentation is up on our webpage on the city's site. This first slide you see,
Somebody, it's up there, isn't it? It's up working.
There you go.
Oh,
there you go. So this is a map showing all year-round resident parking and October resident parking. The purple streets are the year-round streets. The green streets are those that we designate for just the month of October. The boxes on the right give you a sense of the number of passes that we issue. The total October resident passes we issued this past October was a little over 5,200. We mailed the majority of those. We had some returns, and then we had a little over 1,200 people walk in either to the parking office or to the annex. We also processed a little over 450 additional visitor passes to residents who requested them. The box to the right of that indicates the year-round parking passes and visitor passes that are issued. Up through this past October, we had a little over 5,000 that were issued. During the month of October itself, we issued a little over 600. Those are people usually coming into the office to purchase them. Total combined passes was a little over 10,200. The combined walk-ins a little over 1,500. This just gives you a sense of the hours that it takes to process all of these. And then also DPS placed approximately 1,300 signs on 86 streets in and around the downtown along those green streets, which we calculated approximately 120 hours to do that work, and they take them down. Next slide. This goes into enforcement of the resident parking, both year-round and the October streets. Have the 2021 through 2023. These are combined tickets issued by parking enforcement as well as the police department. This past October, we issued a little over 2,200 tickets. Police department towed close to 300 vehicles. And then the bottom chart just shows a comparison of how many were Massachusetts plates and how many were out of state. This map here is similar to the first one you saw. Again, the purple streets are year-round, green streets are the October streets. This gives you a sense of where a lot of the tickets were issued. This shows you the year-round streets only. The next slide will focus on the October streets. So we issued 170 tickets on Federal Street. We provided the sort of the top tiers here. And again, this gives you a sense of where enforcement was done in and around the downtown area. Next slide. This again, same map, but it shows you the number one top streets that were for just October. So Peabody Street, around Common, Ward Street, so on. Next slide. Now we're going to the shuttle. One of the reasons for the increase in cost is we've been adding more dates to the shuttles. This year we added Indigenous Peoples Day. We also added service on the Monday and Tuesday last year, October 30th and 31st. It was only running out of the high school because it was during the week. The university and the hospital obviously have regular staffing hours then, but we did increase the number of days from years past when it rained. Next slide. So this past October, based on counts, there were 16,500 plus people that used the service. Something we saw different from the previous year was the lots never filled this past October, whereas the year before they did. We think that might contribute somewhat to the weather on the weekends in some cases, but also we think the messaging around people taking the commuter rail is working to an extent. And again, just noting that this year we had Indigenous Peoples Day, and we also ran October 30th and the 31st at the high school. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the commuter rail increased service beginning October 7th. There was a slight hiccup in the beginning. They didn't have the crews to actually run the service, but once they did, they were providing 2 trains per hour to and from Salem, 10 more trains from Salem to North Station after 6 p.m. These numbers were provided by Keolis for the month of October on the Rockport and Newburyport line. They provided service to a little over 400,000 passengers. October weekends was 110,000. The average for weekends was about 27,000 passengers each weekend, which they indicated was an increase of 10,000 from this past September. And on Halloween Day, it was 21,000 passengers used the service. Next slide. We also like to push the ferry service as a means to get to and from the city. It runs from late May to October 31st. The Nathaniel Bowditch ferry holds about 150 people. I know larger vessels they try to bring those in, especially during the peak tourism periods. Compared to last October 22, we had somewhat of an increase in ridership for this past October, about a 20% plus change. Okay. And just to note, the ridership in October accounted for almost 38% of the seasonal ridership for 2023. That was my last slide.
Good time.
Answer any questions.
Starting with Councilmember Salem.
Thank you, Dave. I just want to say a few words about the traffic coming into Salem this year. There was a significant decrease of backups on some of the roads coming into Salem. It was noticed by constituents. Happened to be an election year this year, so I was definitely out walking and talking to people, and Jefferson Avenue and Round Avenue did not see the backup traffic even on the weekends that we used to see. I can't make a blanket statement for 24 hours a day every day, but it was a significant decrease. So whatever we did, it was working. The shuttle buses, I think, are great, and expanding that service is great. The fact that the lots weren't filled it just adds to the fact that people don't have to drive into the downtown. They can just park and take the shuttle in. So I think the remaining thing is trying to figure out how to get cars out of the downtown area, because that is still a problem, the little streets downtown. So I just wanted to make sure that you heard that it was a huge improvement. So I do have a question about the year-round passes. It's interesting that 615 people came in October to get their year-round parking pass. Is that because their roads are being enforced more heavily, the parking on their roads?
It is possible, and I think they see a spike, and we do see more activity in October. As you know, we've been looking at who is purchasing the stickers year-round, and I think that contributes to it, that they tend to buy it. And once you're on that annual cycle, now that's the time you would be renewing it anyway. So I think it starts a trend around October. You see a lot more people buying them. So if you buy it in October, it's going to be good. It's good for a year, so you have to buy it.
Oh, they don't start then in January.
No, it's rolling.
Thank you, Chair Scott, not being a member of the committee. To you, Mr. Director Kucharski. Two things. Interesting that 4 out of the top 10 ticketed streets were close proximity to the Hocus Pocuses. And I'm guessing some of the towing members, the higher ones, were in that area. And I'm really glad to Destination Salem that I looked through the whole guide and there's not one mention of Hocus Pocus in previous years. Thank you. But I really want to reinforce how positive the October resident parking was. It was very expanded in Ward 5, and I know a lot of people that in the past were not able to park on their street or had to park blocks away. And I think a lot of people were able to park where they could see their car on their house, which I think is very positive. So I'm really ecstatic about that and hope that continues because I think it really made a positive impact on the residents who had been approved the stickers. Thank you.
Councilor Grosso?
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Just one complaint I got in front of the post office the weekend of Halloween right before. They put the signs out for no parking right in front of the post office. And people that were going in while the post office was still open, they were going in and they were getting $100 tickets. Not knowing they always park there, it's 15 minutes. They're running into their post office box and they came out and they had a $100 ticket. They tried to appeal it, but they were told that they couldn't appeal it. If they could just not, while the post office is still open for business, not put up those signs. It was the weekend right before Halloween, and it was all along the front of the post office. They did go in to complain to the post office, and they said that was up to the city.
I'll have to look into that. We don't typically sign those because those are 30-minute spaces in front of the post office. In front of the Life Bridge, we do put signs up because that's where the shuttles do their drop-offs. But
It was right in front of the post office, and it was a $100 fine.
I'd have to look into that further.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Councilor Scott, or Chair Scott. Not being a member of the committee through you today. Dave, as always, thank you for all of the data that you provide and all of the hard work of the department. I think it's a really great thing to include in your slides the number of hours estimated and inputted by your team and obviously the PD as well. From the downtown's perspective, or I should say all Ward 2's perspective, I can tell you that the answer to your question about October, people coming in for their year-round passes is because enforcement was great this year. So I know the numbers looked very similar to past years, but it felt very different amongst the neighbors, including a couple of residents who were appropriately parked in their own resident street, but had a lapsed pass. So it was a great prompt to get them to get down to the department. Enforcement continues to be great. I would love to see it. You know, I know you all can't be everywhere all of the time, but it's just that is how the word spreads around not allowing illegal parking in the downtown, particularly. With vigilant enforcement, I think we will see year over year, hopefully, decreased violations from visitors. I think that, you know, obviously only time will tell, but we've talked before, that a lot of this stuff gets spread around through, you know, Facebook groups and, you know, all these online tourism websites. I'm going here, can you recommend where I park? A couple of the questions that I have just about this is about enforcement of illegal driveway and parking lot uses. I know we did expand the commercial overlay during the month of October. I would love to have a sense of how many folks are utilizing that program. It would be great to understand who is not utilizing that program as well, so that if I see it, I can report it. Part of folks who were participating in those conversations a couple of years ago will recall part of my vote against that program is because it does continue to drive cars into our smaller side streets outside immediately and outside the downtown, and we are seeing folks just continue to, you know, rent out their personal driveways, and businesses that I don't know are there part of the program, all kinds of things. So I would love to have a better understanding on how that's going and how that program is going and how enforcement's going in that. With regards to the shuttles, I do have a question about, I know it's fantastic that we have the space available when we do, and I know that space is limited, so I'm wondering if there's been any kind of further conversation or research done around opening up other shuttle lots, maybe like in North Salem or the Boston Street area or the PB line, because as we all know, folks come off 128 and they're not usually coming through South Salem. So in order to get to the SSU or the high school lots, they kind of have to traverse from 114 in one way or another. They kind of have to know they're there. Although I do think that I really appreciate the increased marketing around those lots. So can you speak to any additional areas being looked at, if any, or further conversations with neighboring towns?
We have had discussions in the past with other communities. There's been reluctance because I think they have a fear that this will bring traffic to their communities. I know also a lot of times the routes to the north and the west are those that typically get clogged. So if say we were to identify a lot and people that are sitting on shuttle in traffic, you know, Boston Street, Bridge Street, or North Street, I don't know how much usage we get over time of something like that. The reason I think it's the location south of the downtown worked because for the most part, those buses are able to get in and out pretty easily and get back to pick up passengers. Even looking at other lots on Highland Ave, the Walmarts, and those, again, reluctance to participate. It's not to say we won't continue to reach out. We've heard hints that other communities on their own are providing their own shuttle services in Peabody. I'm not specifically aware of that. I've just heard rumors, but it's something we're looking at for the future. We're also looking at wayfinding signage, electronic signs that will notify motorists sooner to tell them the garages are full, as it means to don't come to the downtown. We do have variable message boards that we place at all the main corridors. We do push shuttle signs throughout, and we post those ahead of time as well, so we can try to guide people to get to those the stops that we currently have.
Thanks. And then with regards to the shuttle routes, I know in the past I've mentioned a few times, has there been any further research or looking at any dedicated shuttle routes or specific streets that we can, if they're closed to non-resident traffic, but would allow shuttles, for example, to help maneuver through the downtown?
I haven't looked into something like that yet.
Theoretically, would that open up more easy channels of traversing the downtown and enable more folks to be dropped in different locations?
I really have to look to see what the implications of something like that would be.
Sure, understood. I think I have one more, but my iPad closed. Sorry, everybody. Oh, I did have a question about the number of visitor passes that were granted to October only, resident only passes. What was the number around those and how many did you give out? I mean, I know the number was like 600 and some odd, but there's no cap to the visitor pass program, or there's a cap to the visitor pass program in the October as well as regular year round, right?
So for October, the ordinance indicates that a resident who receives October parking can ask for up to 1 visitor pass. Year-round residents can purchase up to 2.
Thank you for that reminder. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. And I don't know what this says about all of our moves in October, but there's nothing I think that brings Salem residents together more than seeing an out-of-state plate getting towed. And it's probably not a great thing, but it makes me want to say that this year is appreciating each other for everything they did last year, because it was noticeable just walking around and seeing that. This is, I guess, a topic that's come up a few times over the last few years. Just curious where we are on that. Is a goal to ensure that people who are non-residents coming to downtown have some certainty where they're going to park. And I know it's been brought up around reserving spaces for non-residents in the garage, or requiring non-residents to have a reserved space in the garage. Is that something that we've discussed still, or is that something that's in discussion?
It is something that I've talked to the mayor about and I'm investigating. It's just how it would interface with all the other activity that the garage sees. How something like that would work.
Okay. Yeah, and most days of the week probably not needed, but on Friday, Saturday, not having a first come first served situation, I think maybe beneficial, maybe better for residents. The other question I guess is around Councilor Wassenbach brought it up, that around the non-compliant parking lots that have popped up in some locations. Can you just say for the folks at home and folks here, if my neighbor has a large driveway, are they able to rent out those spaces?
No, they're not.
Okay. And should they report that to the police, or should they report to traffic and parking, or how would that be?
They could contact the parking office, and our enforcement staff, they do go out to look at the ones that have the permits to make sure that they're complying with their agreement. And we've identified within the zone those that are not, and I have a list, and I'm planning to sit down with the building commissioner and the city solicitor to review those, so we can sort of engage with them before October this year.
Is there a daily fine for that, like operating anything non-compliant, or how does that work?
Visit zoning, I'm not as familiar, but that would be something either for Beth or the pool of the building commissioner to address.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. First, I want to commend you and your crew on the job that you're doing in October. There is a difference every year. It seems to be getting better and better. I live up in the Hocus Pocus area, and I know that Forest Road Park is somewhat utilized by people coming in, because I know that the streets in that area are blocked off to motor vehicle traffic on the weekends, starting in October. I just don't think that, I think that one comment would be to maybe have some kind of signage for people to be able to park there, because I can see that the amount of tickets I've given in that area are showing that people aren't utilizing the public parking area at Forest Road Park, maybe because they don't know about it. I do know that Councilor Cohen loves to walk around the streets and take the initiative of telling people himself that, on the streets, if we get you again a ticket book, would also contribute to the revenue that we're getting. And commend you on your Belichick-esque demeanor that you had up here. think that your straightforward answers were right on the money. And again, thank you for all that.
Bless Dave. We should all be allowed to write together.
Mr. Krzyzewski, I will say, someone that lives on North Street, it was definitely marked improvement this year, at least on those entrance corridors. It was kind of like a fifth world every weekend, being able to take a left very easily onto North Street on Saturday. It was lighter traffic in October than the rest of the year, which was interesting. And thank you very much. I forgot about the Halloween parking overlay. There are a lot of those in North Salem, and we were in constant contact at the beginning of the month, and that was one of my pieces of feedback early on in October, to make sure that the permit and application process for those can start as early as possible, because there was a lot of confusion with those that have lots that are in the zone and wanted to provide the service, which we as neighbors want them to be able to provide, so the cars can go there and not circle around. And there was just some confusion getting that passed, so thank you for being able to work through that. And hopefully we can definitely start it earlier in the season. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, I believe we have public safety. And I will note that we are about halfway through. We're at 7 o'clock, so we're 1 hour. I don't know. Okay.
I just want to briefly on the ferry thing, give a shout out to Bill McHugh and BHC and the ferry operators, because this year they brought the Salacia to Salem on October 7th. Usually we get that vessel later in the month. We're talking about transportation and ways we can get people here that aren't cars. The Valor is just 149 passengers, the Salacia 600. And it was used heavily. So we're going to try again next year to get it here for the weekends.
Next up, we have the Chief of Police, Lucas Miller. You both are doing the presentation together.
No, I think I'm up first.
Oh, my slide stopped. Okay, yes. I will try.
I want to, first of all, I want to start off with an alibi. I had a lot teared up, which causes me to tear up occasionally unexpectedly. It seems like I'm crying. I'm probably not.
Probably not.
I'll start with running through our general provisions for modern happenings, and I know most of you are familiar with it, but for some of the counselors and anybody else who's listening who would like to hear that, but I'll need to go through it quick. The police department's come up with a plan for modern happenings that dates back many, many years, and we adjust it by a matter of degrees each year. We'll discover things that we could have done better, we'll discover things we didn't do very well. But really, this plan dates back to my predecessors, and they deserve the credit for that. And I should also mention some of my MVPs that I wrote here, Captain Salvo, Lieutenant Lewis, and Officer Pierce. We'll call them lifelines. But really, they do a ton of work for modern happenings, and they carry me to a great degree. But in order to properly police downtown Salem during modern happenings, we really kind of create two police departments. We have a command center that operates the second department that works downtown. That way, we can still provide the same level of police service throughout Salem during those very, very busy days of modern happenings. So if you call the police from South Salem, you should experience roughly the same police service that you do, regardless of what day in October it is. Obviously, that's best case scenario, but we do that by bringing in a lot of officers on overtime. We bring in officers from other agencies that help us out. And then, specifically, the Massachusetts State Police, our partners in NETLAC, which is a sort of a regional task force of officers, and then some officers from some of our surrounding departments. And that does increase overtime significantly. I brought up the first, I don't think I have an overtime slide, but I will tell you that the overtime budget for modern happenings represents approximately a little bit less than a third of my overtime. Oh, thank you. Perfect. There we go. All right. Okay. Represents approximately a third of my overall overtime budget. And it was up approximately 15%, 16% this year. Now, in looking at the month of October, we're now looking at the month of October and the weeks surrounding October that have significant activity. We do use that Placer AI data to try to give us a sense to predict how many people are going to show up in Salem. But we also, one of the things we found is really the weather is a better predictor than past years. If we have a gorgeous Saturday, for instance, in 2022, I think it was the second Saturday in October, was sort of the most beautiful day. That was actually the busiest day in October, close to 100,000 visitors on that Saturday. But using weather, using Placer AI, using common sense, we do try to kind of predict how many people we'll have on a given day and assign extra officers for those days. And on the really busy days, bring in some of those sort of more exotic units, rapid response team, mountain bikes, explosive ordnance detection. But what we found this year, and this contributed significantly to our overtime expenses, is during the week we had very, very busy days. There were many Fridays and even a couple of Mondays where there were so many visitors to Salem that we had to shut down streets and call in extra officers. So I would describe the overall increase in overtime in last year's budget to be partially due to that, and also partially due to the several contracts that were settled. My patrolman and my supervisor settled contracts that covered 2 years that mattered for a little bit less than half of that increase. And while we do work very hard to keep those numbers down, and for instance, the use of state troopers does help us along. We don't have to pay for the state police. They supply those troopers for free. There is still significant work done by Salem Police because of the extra crowds, and I'm afraid that if you look at the numbers of people, those crowds will probably continue to grow. And I think if you look at some of the data that I'm going to show you, you'll see, and I apologize because this graph isn't to scale, but you'll see that our calls for service during the month of October has been increasing, and it's roughly equivalent to the increase in visitors during October. And that's calls for service throughout Salem. You can see there's about a slightly less than a 200 call increase from 2022 to 2023. And then you can see, I mentioned sort of the citywide and then the downtown, we divide that up. So that's just looking at Halloween itself, the 31st itself, really just to give you a sense of the difference between calls citywide and then calls confined to downtown Salem. And then again, kind of kept static as far as the last 3 years go. I'm not including 2020 because it was a COVID year, and let's just say things were strange. A little bit on what Dave Kucharski was talking about. Our resident ticket enforcement has increased steadily, and that's part due to, as I mentioned, increased use of the state police. They are particularly good at writing tickets, and one of the things we do task them with, and they accept without question, is that resident ticket enforcement. I will tell you that the state police have been they've been better and better partners each year, and that's in thanks to, I think, state police leadership. Chris Mason, the former colonel, and Jack Mohan, the current colonel, have really worked very hard to make the troopers, we'll say, more user-friendly. But that being said, there's a limit of what I want to do with them, right? I feel that it's important to use Salem police officers to police Salem in the most meaningful ways. And that also includes those outside agencies. I'm grateful that, for instance, a Peabody officer would want to come to Salem and help us. And there are some great Peabody police officers, but I think in general you would get better police service from a Salem police officer. And it's in part because it's a home game, so to speak, but it's also in part because of the excellent quality of Salem police officers. And then tows remain kind of static over the last 2 years, and that has more to do with tow truck companies. We did bring in an extra tow truck company in 2022, which is why you see kind of a jump there, but we are limited in the number of cars we can tow, literally just because the tow truck has to get the car, hook it up, drive it to the impound lot, and then get back. And I'm afraid the amount of traffic does impede that. That's really what limits our ability to tow even more cars. Where even I like to see New Yorkers get to get back to the numbers of officers, you can see here, these are the days in late September and October. And I'm sorry, I didn't put the last week of November, or the first week of November here, but it should be up here. But these are the extra officers that we bring in, get a sense of how many that is. And we did, as I said, we based that on sort of the expectations of visitors to Salem. And obviously that last Saturday and Halloween itself were the busiest 2 days. But even in late September, we did have extra officers. Then I should say those are shifts. So an officer might work double, you might work a day tour, have an evening tour, and that would appear as 2 on that number. All right, with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate seeing the data here, and thank you for keeping it safe. I know I personally saw you out and about on Halloween night even, so it was great to see you in the trench of things all season as well. I have a question about street closures, because that is under the purview of the police department to make the call on street closures. Could you explain kind of your methodology of when is it important to close a street for safety purposes, and how you kind of wait to make that call? Just kind of any context to that, because there's lots of questions around it.
Sure. So, and I think I would put this in the category of something we're learning to do better. One of the biggest complaints we took from 2022 was that the street closures felt a little bit willy-nilly. We did try to post when we planned to close them, but we really closed them on what I would call a dynamic basis. When we felt it was important to close a street, we closed it. And of course, that didn't give people a lot of notice, and I think people were understandably upset. We generally close streets when we feel that the volume of pedestrians begins to present danger to those pedestrians. And in some cases, we'll do it ahead of time. For instance, on Washington Street on Saturday before Halloween, we know we're gonna have to close that. So pretty early in the day, we'll block it off with hard barriers. And I will also talk a little bit about my fears. Obviously, fears of terrorism are very real and legitimate in our time. But even somebody who mistakes the gas pedal for the brake is something that keeps me up at night. Literally, and it can happen to almost anybody if you look at stories about that in the paper. When I was a rookie patrolman in Greenwich Village, a woman drove into Washington Square Park completely innocently and killed a number of people simply because she had her foot on the brake and her foot on the gas and couldn't believe it was on the brake. So we like to use hard barriers for that. To ensure that doesn't happen. And unfortunately, those hard barriers are a little harder to move. DPW is very responsive to us, but it means we have to get those barriers in place ahead of time. And that does provide us a certain degree of inconvenience, even beyond the street closures. But that pedestrian safety is really what we have in mind. There are some times where we'll close, for instance, front Charter when the pedestrian wall gets so crowded that I really just want an escape valve. I want to get people off there and give them a place to go. And then in the really busy days, we wind up moving down to Derby and New Derby to again, just give people a greater range to sort of diffuse the density of pedestrian traffic. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
Actually, I'm so sorry to interrupt, let me add a little bit, which this year, we tried to adhere to a schedule a little bit better. We put out when we plan on closing, and if we had to close half an hour earlier, close half an hour late, well, so be it. But we tried to adhere to the schedule, we put out a little bit more, and I think we received some more positive feedback as a result of that.
Thanks. I will just give a couple of anecdotal comments that I have that I'm sure we all have and this room could probably share. With the street closures, it's great to know when they're happening, definitely. I do find it slightly confusing, specifically Washington Street, when just one direction is closed and the other direction isn't. The people walking, the tourists walking, don't understand that. They say, oh, the street's closed, I can walk in the street, and then, no, it's not. So I understand keeping traffic flowing, but especially in those busy weekends, once people see that it's closed and people are walking on one side, they do not get that concept and understand that. I think if there's enough volume for one side to be closed, it should both be closed. Plus, like you said, it kind of releases the valve into that pressure. And then I guess my second comment on that is the patrol cars down the pedestrian pathway is always a concern, and that's always a fear in the back of my head. Do you ever have, or do you have any guidelines for when, I love seeing officers on bikes. I think it was Councilor Cohen maybe posted a video where there was a training down at the fire station. There were like 70 officers on bikes going out. That was so great to see. I'd love to see them done, but it makes me so nervous seeing a patrol car drive down the mall when there are so many just people walking and it's very busy. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, or kind of how you make that determination that it makes sense to be driving that patrol car down there.
So I too love police bicycles. Seeing them makes me happy. In terms of the two-way traffic on Washington Street, I also try to err on the side of closing the street, but I certainly take your criticisms hard, because I think, it is confusing to have cars going one way on the street. Of course, as you mentioned, the counterpoint is the traffic flow, right? We really want to be able to diffuse those terrible traffic jams as much as we can. I think the messaging about that train has been helpful, but if traffic is still a nightmare, particularly on those busy days. In terms of police cars in the pedestrian wall, because of the previous comments you've made, I've asked both the patrol supervisor and the officer in charge to monitor that. I do stand by officers in cars on the wall. It's the most efficient way to deliver officers, and I think the presence of a police car has a calming effect. But when the pedestrian density gets past a certain point, it is a judgment call, but when it gets past a certain point, we do say the essence of the car, which is typically that car you see there, should stay off the wall.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments and additional context. I will note that hearing that the traffic flow is more important, you're not necessarily saying traffic flow is more important than pedestrian safety, but that's what I'm hearing is like keeping that valve open as long as possible to keep the traffic flow going. I think kind of the opposite. It's more important to keep the safe street, the pedestrians walking in the street as safe as possible. And I understand it's a fine line and hard to determine, so appreciate your comments on that. And as I took the first questions, any questions from the committee?
Yeah.
No, Council?
Thank you. Two things. The residents who live, like I mentioned, Hocus Pocus, proximity, are very appreciative that the barricades, which used to just say resident parking only, say road closed. I don't know about people in the room or the audience, but if I'm in Philadelphia or Peabody and I see a barricade that says road closed, I'm thinking gas leak or paving. Probably not going to go past the barricade or knock it over. So anyone in this room who wants to join me in October, Lane and Wade, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a minivan with 3 families with no Carolina plates, and I'm standing there waiting to ask them what house they live in on Ocean Ave. So very appreciative of that and the good work that you guys do patrolling the area. But I really want to commend you and your staff. Councilor Presidency and I have talked about this, you and I have talked about this. people may be apprehensive to bring their family to a game at Gillette Stadium or to a concert. And in Salem, we have really lots of people who are on top of each other, just like those events. But it's somewhat magical what you guys do, that I believe that people who have family and friends who come here, or just people who come to visit, feel safe. I think their families feel safe. I think everyone feels safe. I think it's really something.
Okay,
You're crying? But I think it's something that separates Salem and really your whole staff, from you down to everyone on the patrols who's doing the street. I think are responsible for that, the way you work and collaborate with other communities and other departments in the city, but I think it's really something unique to Salem, so thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Scott, through you to our wonderful chief. We talk a lot, and you're a Ward 2 resident, you're a downtown guy. This is more for everybody else present, but I am ever grateful for the increased vigilance and attention and nuance that you and the Salem PD are bringing to how we manage October, specifically in the downtown. And I really appreciate the communication lines that you keep open with not only obviously city administration, but with all of us as well. I have a couple of questions or comments here. So this question is for you, but it's really also for the mayor and the broad city staff, which is, I think we continue to sort of sound surprised by this midweek activity. Do you need to get that? This increased activity during the week, right? And I think what in my totally non-scientific hypothesis is that we're now living in a post-COVID predominant work from home culture now, where there's so much more flexibility. People can go to an Airbnb or a hotel and work for a couple days while they're on vacation and take a phone call here and there. We're not bound to weekend travel anymore in the same way we used to be. So I guess my question is for you and for the city broadly. Are we adjusting any of our planning or look ahead or forecasting as to how to better support or remain, fully not staffed, but you know what I'm saying, sort of keeping all of our levels up, and so that we can continue to address concerns, whether it's public safety concerns, trash concerns, parking enforcement concerns during the week as well. And if there are any numbers on that?
I think in terms of overall staffing, I will tell you that it is a tremendous challenge to keep the department at fully staffed.
Yeah.
When I got here 3 years ago, almost immediately the department was down about 15 officers. It was a real challenge to police the way we're supposed to police. And I know I've said this before, but there's really the baseline of policing, the lowest acceptable level is we have to be able to answer when people call for help. When people call 911 and say, I can help, we can't say, we're real busy.
It's October, right?
Thankfully, and because of a lot of hard work on the part of some of my officers, we've been able to recruit and hire officers so that we maintain, at least within 2 or 3 slots of what we're mandated by ordinance, which is 95 officers. When we're down, it does make Halloween, October that much more challenging. Right? Not only do we have to hire more officers on overtime, there's just fewer officers available. The amount of fatigue is greater. But I think we're in good shape right now. We are in danger of losing a number of officers to the state police, which is hiring, and that is an attractive job. I mean, obviously, I'm going to tell you that I believe the Salem Police Department's a better job, but I understand kind of the pull of a bigger, busier agency. That being said, we have officers in the pipeline, officers in the academy, and officers I'm very much looking forward to hiring. That will fill those gaps. So in terms of overall staffing, I think the picture is not rosy, but it's good. And in terms, just in general, I touched upon that. I think part of that new dynamic of working from home and different schedules is probably what leads us to see that many more visitors during the week. So it's something where we were a little bit surprised by this year, I will admit, but we will work to kind of build that into our equation. I can't tell you that the overall overtime budget for October isn't going to go up as a result.
Yeah.
But obviously I'm a little biased, but I believe that money was spent.
And I would agree. I think one of the things that we do see increasing throughout the week is not just visitors to Salem, right, but all we're seeing increased buskers, increased traffic, increased, people walking around downtown, increased street closures in the midweek. And so when we look at this, when we look at that and we think about the phone calls or how we want to make sure that all of those calls coming in, that we can also be staffed the same level. I just wonder, looking ahead to next year, just including that in your preparations and then also reporting on it next year's Common Happenings meeting, I'd love to see like a full 7-day track. Okay, the street closures. So one of the comments I had last year about street closures, and I think Councilor Cohen just touched upon it, was just better signage, just more wayfinding signage. Not wayfinding, that's the wrong phrase. I just took that from David Kucharski. But more informational signage that says residents can pass. This is how you do that, or whatever the case may be. I know historically we've had some issues with residents attempting to access a closed street. That I have received fewer calls this year. That does not mean that there were fewer issues, but it just I'm hoping that it's indicative that there's better communication going on with resident access to closed streets. But just a comment on signage, always. And then one of my other questions is, and I know you and I talked about this, it's a really big challenge, is how do you sort of try to ensure consistent service and the Salem PD brand sort of maintained when we're bringing in enforcement from all other departments in the state? Because it can be a very, very different experience to interact with a state cop than with one of your homegrown Salem PD officers. And I know that you, as a chief and as a leader, have a very strong position around the kind of interactions you want folks to have with police in this town. So what is it, can you speak to the public just a little bit about what it is you do to try and ensure consistent service in that way?
Sure. I think that's why I mentioned earlier that I prefer to use Salem police officers. You hit the nail on the head. And I will tell you that the state troopers are, they're a little bit less flexible than we are, and that's by design, right? That's why you have a state agency that does more impersonal policing on the highways, et cetera, and so forth. But the major in the Danvers barracks, Jim Bazinati, and I worked very closely to address those troopers, let them know what we wanted from them, what we expected from them. And I think they were more responsive this year. They're not without nuance, right? But they do they follow my directions a little bit better, I think, this year. And the same thing with those visiting police officers, right? We do have the officers in charge, the officers who are running those districts downtown, as well as the event coordinators whom I brought tonight, who really work to let those officers know what we expect of them. And then in some cases, very rarely we'll say, hey, you're not, your services are not required here. Thanks for coming. Go on.
Yeah. I really appreciate it, and I think, for those that are relatively newer residents to Salem, we've come a really long way from lines of SWAT gear on Halloween night, which can have an opposite effect, right, than they want. So I personally, from what I hear from the residents and for my own self, I really appreciate the way that you all are approaching policing during October. So thanks for your efforts. I do have one last question. I'm sorry, I'm totally hogging the microphone. Just with regards to the Community Impact Unit, which does incredible work year-round and is so important to our community, when you talk about these shifts and how you have to sort of staff and move everybody around, is that unit ever redeployed in any way, or do they maintain their CIU sort of functioning all year round without October impact?
So typically the way things work, they'll work their CIU shifts, but then those overtime shifts, those regular patrol shifts will be available to them as well. So you'll get a little bit of both. But when I create that downtown command, as it were, it gets divided into districts. 2 initially when it's a little quieter, and then 5 once it gets really busy. And there's a downtown commander, typically a captain, who is coordinating the handing out of tasks, responsibilities, calls for service. So that if he's got a member of CIU in one of his districts, he'll be aware of that. And even if that officer is sort of working a regular patrol detail, we know he's a sort of an extra asset and can be deployed to something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Another just huge cheer for the CIU and the impact they have in our community. Thank you.
Me too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair Scott, without being a member of the committee, and to Chief Miller through you. More accolades. A lot of what I was going to say has been said, but I walk the downtown every day in October, and I have for years. And I've also lived in other cities, and a large police presence doesn't always make people, feel safe. It can make people feel very nervous, and I get to observe, your officers interacting, with very dense crowds, and making people feel comfortable and safe, and that is a huge factor in the success of our haunted happenings. So I also want to make that point as well. And I also want to mention the fire department as well and their responses. And also, I also want to comment too on the density on the pedestrian walkway. I think it's been a combination over the last few years of getting vendors off out there. It used to be so incredibly dense. If somebody needed medical attention or something here, they would be toast. It was frightening, and it was much more manageable, this year and last year too. It's definitely on a curve to, I think, have been a lot more safer. Definitely. A couple of the intersections I noticed a really marked improvement in pedestrian safety when there is police presence there for crossing is the Essex and Washington intersection, and also the Common. At Brown and that area too in front of the statue. That's, as you know, is very chaotic, and it also backs up. It backs up all the traffic because they literally don't get through. And anytime there are police there, I know there's always limited resources. So, but as much as that can be done, at least those are the 2 intersections that stand out to me as the more there's somebody there with eyes on that. And also, I think, whatever you said and the conversation it speaks to, I hope you know the city has been supportive, and it also speaks to the need of us as a city. I know DPS is hugely supportive and helpful as well. It's amazing how sometimes in the morning on the downtown looks there are 100,000 people. But, for us as a city, we need to continue giving you the resources that you need to continue what you do. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
She doesn't have any questions. I'm just wondering if you would consider deputizing Councilor Cullen.
All of us. We should all be able to write tickets.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Council. I don't want to be accused of spiking the ball, but I really appreciate some of the comments, all of the comments you made. This is an extraordinary police department. No police department is perfect, but I hope it's clear how lucky I feel to lead this department and to have you all as partners. I do feel very supported. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will make one programming note. We're about an hour into the meeting.
Sorry,
we still have the fire department review, the consumer. It's entirely my fault. Consumer, sorry, it's my day job. Resident feedback summary, as well as I do want to take public comments since we have somebody here and so many people here in the room this evening. So on that note, take it away, Deputy. On that note, tighten it up, Watson phone.
Hello everybody, I'm Deputy Chief Shaw from the Salem Fire Department. Chief Diana could not make it here today. Chief's conference, so he sent me here. The fire department, for this past Halloween, The Salem Fire Department Emergency Management deployed additional improvement strategies to ensure the safety of the public safety during the months of September and October. Salem Fire saw an increase of 26% in calls for service, but no increase or significant fires or public emergency incidents. Salem Fire medical and fire protection. We have two UTV medical car units that we deploy in the downtown area to help us with medical, not just medical calls, but also fire calls that we might have in that area. As you know, we were talking about having a police car trying to get down that Essex Street is very difficult. You can imagine how difficult it would be trying to get a fire truck down there as well. So we've had many incidents that were handled by our medical cars that were working in those sectors, as the chief had mentioned. The cops were strategically stationed in the vicinities of Town Hall Square and Hawthorne Boulevard. Cops were staffed with firefighter EMTs with a cache of emergency medical equipment. This year, the cops responded to 149 calls for service during the months of September and October, which meant that we didn't have to have a fire truck respond to those incidents. They were able to handle it on their own. Using the smaller cars for calls downtown eliminated the need for fire apparatus, as I just said. One car is equipped with a small fire pump with 75 gallons of water. In the event of a fire downtown, this car can maneuver through crowds more effectively, and the fire pump enabling them to get water on a small fire quickly, and maybe eliminate the need for the apparatus to try to respond to that location. Additional apparatus were in service at outside stations throughout the city, and so that surrounded downtown to ensure that there was no delay in response to any part of the city. We had automatic aid agreements with Beverly and Danvers to have apparatus on our most busiest days. We able, for instance, had an automatic aid agreement with Beverly for the ladder truck to respond to anything upper, or I should say Lower Bridge Street or in the Willows neighborhood, rather than trying to get our ladder truck to get through those crowds. Due to proven strategies employed by the fire department, there was a decrease in response times for most types of calls in the entire city, including the downtown, during most of September and October. We also had fire prevention crews out working with the licensing officer, going because of the crowds that we see in the city. Our restaurants and our bars sometimes will overfill their places. So when they see our presence, the fire prevention crew and the licensing officer often walk through and make sure that egresses are maintained and safe conditions remain in all those businesses. Once they see that we're going to be coming around, they come into compliance. There were years back when I was serving as fire marshal that we did see situations where bars were overfilled, egresses were blocked, and that's just a recipe for disaster, as we've seen in past incidents. Emergency management, things that we've done to try to make things better and safer in the downtown area for first responders and for our visitors and residents. So there are 22 light towers that were strategically placed throughout the downtown at significant choke points, crosswalks, intersections, and designated bus and ride share drop-off locations. More lighting ensured safer conditions for pedestrians, vehicles, and public safety officers. Barricade fencing was placed to ensure pedestrians remain in areas still used by motor vehicles. Jersey barriers and large DPW vehicles were used to ensure no vehicles were allowed to enter the zones designated as pedestrian areas. Signboards were used to share vital information with visitors. There were evacuation plans that were developed for unforeseen weather events or emergencies, and we used a unified command structure to ensure good communication and effective management of all police, fire, and DPW, as well as outside public safety agencies. So those are the notes that were left for me to share with you from the chief. I'm certainly going to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Rosenthal?
I'll keep it short. Thank you for your comments, and I just wanted to say thank you to you and all of the department and the chief for the incredible support that you provide, especially in the downtown during October. The medical cards are a huge benefit, and I would be curious to know if the chief feels like that is, sufficient quantity to provide the service that you're all trying to provide, or if there's any additional resources that we should be talking about or be thinking about planning ahead in future years. If you consider, the growth of the crowds coming to Salem, or if there's anything that we need to be sort of having, especially I'm thinking around light towers as well, because those are really helpful and beneficial to downtown Westchilton areas as you described. So anything that we need to be thinking about increasing over time, or does the chief really feel like this is a sufficient and stable way to move forward?
I think that we're always looking for better ways to do things. We work very well with the police department to make sure that we keep the downtown safe as well as the rest of the city of Salem. As far as the carts go, we use those carts more and more every single year. At all events, we use them at the food truck festival. We use them at the fireworks. We do have 2 different fireworks times that we have in the city. We have the ones that we have, which is actually another little challenge that I didn't talk about too much, but we do have the fireworks for Halloween, and those are shot off at a different location than we do for the 4th of July celebration. And that's kind of in a residential neighborhood, so it creates some challenges that we work well with Ray and his team over at the DPW to make sure that we keep that area safe when those are being shut off.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Connie? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And then last we have community feedback from residents.
Before you touch on that, we did use smart funds to purchase light towers. The towers we've been using usually come to us later in the month because they're deployed for things like hospital fair, so we get them from their act. So we purchased some for our own use to have earlier in the month.
That's great.
Hi, Counselor. Thanks so much for having us tonight. I want to take just a quick moment to join the mayor in thanking so many of our staff members for spending the evening with us tonight after working so hard all day. I also want to introduce you to someone of you who's going to be an important face in the months of October moving forward. Jeremy Fisk is our new special events manager and is filling the big shoes that Ellen Falkowski left behind. And so he is here to learn tonight, and he wasn't part of pulling off this October, and we tried to be kind by bringing him on in January, not September. But just wanted to make sure that you knew who he was for moving forward, and we're going to present this together. So, excuse me. You may be aware we send out a community survey every late fall after October is over. And what I'm going to share, I strongly suspect that is going to not come to a surprise to any of you. I'm sure a lot of this feedback is the same feedback that you have received, but I wanted to, Jeremy and I have been going through the data and the feedback quite a bit over the last few months to really distill down the key takeaways. So this year we had 932 people respond to the survey, and wanted to just point out some probably the most prominent bits of feedback. So as has been mentioned quite a bit, we received a lot of positive feedback this year on traffic mitigation and on getting the word out to not park downtown. Of course, you know, we can always continue to improve on that, and will. But we were happy to know that the public was starting to agree that we're on the right track. We got positive responses to our police procedures, and there was, the feedback was that we had good communication on the road closures. We need better communication on opening roads. And some of you I know gave that feedback as well, that at the end, you know, we always thought it was very important to let everybody know when the roads were closing, but we haven't always paid as close attention, well, not paid as close attention, but not sent out any feedback when the roads were opening back up and the garages had room again. So we got a lot of feedback on that, so we will try to figure out a way to get that that communication out as well this year. There's a need to work on tour regulations and sizes, and a concern about the size of crowds. And after I'm done and after Kara's done, the mayor's going to get up and talk about some specific measures that we're thinking about related to some of this feedback moving forward. So we just wanted to give you a little bit, just a snapshot of, again, some key points, data-wise on, so the left-hand side is rating the city's process, preparedness, and response to the following aspects of haunted happenings. So everything from public safety measures to managing downtown vendors, street performers, inspectional services, cleanup, traffic management, parking enforcement, and the hospitality of the people with whom our residents came in contact. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that this is indicating how adequately people felt informed about road closures, parking restrictions, and event logistics during haunted happenings. And this doesn't show on this slide comparison from previous years, but this definitely was a strong point that people felt had gone well this year. So I am happy to take questions.
Thank you. I just don't want to slide through this. The cleanup number was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And kudos to DPS. I think I heard that. The most during the last season was how clean everything was, and that's not an easy thing to have happen. And I know every time I was walking downtown, I saw them out cleaning up trash and emptying the trash barrels, and what a difference. Like, it was huge, it was noticed, good job, and you deserve those high numbers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair Stott, not being a member of the committee. I just want to reinforce what Councilor Marcillo said. And one other thing, because, you know, it's been said that you show up the day after Halloween and it's unbelievable how clean the pedestrian mall is. But I just want to say to anyone who knows anyone looking for a kid that our DPS is significantly down in staff. And there's a lot of great jobs and great opportunities. It's a great place to work. You know, even people who start seasonally end up, there's a lot of people at DPS and other places who have ended up seasonally and gotten full-time jobs. So spread the word, because they're gonna need it come summer and in the fall.
Anyone
else? Councilor Rosenthal?
Thank you for all of the data that you're sharing here tonight with the survey. I am a little dismayed by the fact that only 932 people responded to this out of a city of 45,000 people, every single one of whom is impacted in October. So my question, and no fault in this question at all, but I am curious as to just what are the modalities through which the survey is distributed? Is it only electronic? Is the hyperlink available on the landing page of the website? Can you just talk through, for the public's reference, although everyone listening tonight probably responded to the survey, is my guess, but there's just for the record.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. And this was our first year of this administration, so we're learning, but we distributed it through the website. We sent it out via press release. We put it out over social media a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. I think it was open for about a 1-month period of time. But definitely open to, through all of our social media channels, and definitely very open to feedback on that. If any counselors have any ideas for this October, after this October, I agree with you. I'd love to spread the word further and get more feedback.
And I'm sorry, was it bilingual or in multiple languages?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, through.
Yes.
It's an automatic translation system. So it's not
Based on the browser setting?
It's through Microsoft Forms, so you select the language you want to take it.
Yeah, so it's not maybe the most ideal form of translation, but it was translatable.
Thank you.
Councilor Merkel?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just had a very, thank you, Councilor Staff. Not being a member of the committee, I didn't know how to interpret, just the stat there where, how adequately to feel informed, and it's 1 to 5. I assume 5 is very informed, or
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yep, 5 is very informed, and 1 is not at all informed.
Not at all informed. Oh, okay, thank you. And
Apologies for not including that key there.
yeah, and also just really quickly, it is surprising to me that Maura didn't take the survey, because it was also, like, I sent it out in my newsletter. I know it was on other counselor newsletters. I saw it everywhere. So, yeah, we'll keep pushing, but it did make the rounds. So.
Yeah, it's a mystery, but definitely we'll welcome your help after this coming October to help spread the word further.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing, because, looking at these numbers, the have no opinion really weights some of them. And so I'm just curious if we can look at how to better utilize the data that we're getting back, so that, instructional services, most of us have no use for.
Yeah.
How would I know, right? And it's definitely pulling that number down, which seems weird. But
Yeah.
that's fine.
And we didn't use a lot of new questions this year. These were a lot of them historically asked questions, and some of them, as we learn, may be less and less relevant, but we'll pay attention to that. But that's a good point too about the no opinion piece.
I just have one question. Thank you. In regards to the survey, and that's going out to the public, now, are businesses allowed to respond to that? Local businesses to basically give you their thoughts as to what they might like to see a little bit different, since they're the ones that are mostly impacted, not just the residents?
That is a wonderful transition question. And I can bring out Karen McGlynn next, who's going to talk about the business survey.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara.
I would imagine if a business owner is a resident of Salem, they could do 2 surveys, because we've got resident survey, and then we do a separate survey of just the businesses, the Destination Salem does. And this year we got 58 responses. to that survey, asking, how their October went. And there were a lot of questions in the survey. Happy to share that whole survey with the council if they'd be interested in seeing it. But I just picked 2 questions to focus on. One is kind of what were their overall impressions of haunted happenings, and in general, they were pretty happy, with 72% saying that their overall impression was good or very good. 20% had a fair impression, and 8% had a very poor or poor impression. We also asked about their view on the city's processes, preparedness, and response in the various areas, and no surprise. Well, first let me just show you the blue. I combined the positives and the negatives just to make the graph easier to read. So the blue lines in the chart up there represent those who indicated good or very good, orange is fair, green is poor or very poor, and then the light blue is no opinion. So the businesses gave the city really high marks in the areas of public safety, cleanup, and also the hospitality of the personnel that they came in to contact with. There were mixed results with regard to the areas of traffic management and parking, and the lowest marks were given in the areas of management of street performers.
Thank you.
Councilor Marcelo?
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if any of your questions deal with their ability to park during October, to find a parking spot, employees of their businesses, and if that had some impact on their numbers for access.
I don't think that there was a specific question about their ability to park, but there were definitely comments made about it.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay, and coming up on our last topic of the evening, areas for future improvement.
Thanks, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I'm going to go through these. These are topics that I think are capable of engendering a lot of conversation and discussion and questions. And so I hope you'll know this is not the last time we're going to have this conversation. And happy to answer questions now, but these are all things that I think are going to be, if not coming before the council in the near future, they're going to be topics for other public boards to look at. So the first thing I want to say is that we are generally concerned about the pace of revenues versus expenses when it comes to October. And so we are looking at a few opportunities for revenue generation. Not all of these will be in place for this year. We are looking at variable meter rates for on-street parking, which may be piloted this year. Certainly won't be everywhere, but this is the idea that we can require pay-by-app at certain parking meters on the street to be able to charge the value of that parking space on October, Saturday if you're parking on street downtown and still paying $1 an hour, shame on us. But because of the ability to regulate those rates in the app, we can have resident discounts for parking on street and non-residents being charged a higher rate. We're looking at opportunities to affect the pricing based on the demand for those spaces. The shuttle is certainly something that's contributed to the increase in costs that we've had, and that we've started to have conversations about if it can really continue to be free. And not saying that this year necessarily it won't be, but I think that's the place that we're looking at. Even $1 a ride being something that could recover the cost for us that we're seeking to provide this service. And the last thing I'll mention is that the Municipal Empowerment Act, we're tracking this. This is state legislation that's pending right now in Boston that does provide for cities and towns to have the opportunity to increase their meals excise and lodging excise. The lodging excise could go up by as much as 1%, the meals excise as much as by 1/4 of 1%. Would not bring in huge amounts of revenue for the city, would be very helpful in terms of us being able to meet these escalating costs. One of the reasons that police and fire overtime, DPW overtime go up is because of the increased demand of time, but also as the contracts go up, as the chief mentioned, the wages increase with each contract, and those wages affect how much you collect for overtime. So we are negotiating now with both of our police unions. We're about to enter negotiations with the fire department, and so I think we can anticipate those overtime costs, even if there was an increase in the number of calls and hours were being assigned, but those rates are going to go up and those costs are going to go up in years ahead. So that's just one area for improvement that I didn't have a slide on, I just wanted to mention, which is around revenues. The first topic that we're looking at is public guides. As mentioned, some of the feedback that came from the resident survey. Certainly a conversation we've had with the community and with the guides that are part of our community for the last couple of years. None of these are all locked in stone, and I also want to say, I'm really grateful for the feedback from our legal department, from both Ellen and Jeremy from the police department. Council Watson-Feld's been very helpful in providing feedback as well, which we appreciated. We've seen an explosion really in the number of licensed guides in Salem, and certainly the number of unlicensed guides who are conducting tours in Salem. These are some of the changes that have been suggested. Not saying that they're all going to end up getting into any kind of final ordinance draft, but these are ideas that have been shared here by councilors, by members of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, the Derby Street Neighborhood Associations, and the neighborhood associations, and by members of the guide community itself. Prohibited stop and locations based on the size of the group, requiring certain distancing requirements between stop groups, regulating use of amplification differently. There have been conversations in the past around surcharges, and really what we're looking at now is does it make more sense to have an impact fee tied to the size of the group, because that's relatable to the impacts on city services, like going from $9,000 or $10,000 for portable restrooms when we started providing them about a decade or two ago, up to almost $100,000 for portable restrooms now. Highlighting the compliant guides, we want to celebrate everyone who's doing things the right way, and whether that's through additional opportunities to promote them. I think that's also a way to incentivize really good behavior by the people who want to support. Constant feedback is we can do all these things, and if we don't have increased enforcement, it doesn't matter. So we've already had conversations about increasing the enforcement. So the number of personnel who will be out there enforcing guide regulations will be increased this year, regardless of the changes to the ordinance. And it's something that we're going to continue to prioritize, because all the changes in the world aren't going to matter if we don't have the ability to enforce the ordinance on the folks who are not compliant. Educating our coach bus tour companies around the regulations and the requirements here. Destination Salem does a great job of working with that industry, and we want to make sure that they're fully aware, what the requirements are if they're planning to come here, so they can be compliant in advance. And then this is the last thing I just want to talk about, was like the question around whether or not to cap the number of licenses. And that's a really tricky one, because then you have to choose how you distribute the licenses that you are providing. We do it with some things, like certain licenses that are capped in number, but I think that's a question that we could have a further discussion with the council around, is if we cap it, how we go through the process of deciding who gets to get one of those licenses, and how you do it in a way that's both legal and constitutional, but also helping us kind of achieve policy goals. And so I think that's the last change that I would add there, is something that we're looking at. The next topic that we're looking at, as this was mentioned in the business survey, is the management of street performers. So street performers are no longer licensed because of the Constitution, but we are able to. This was a topic that came out of the feedback from, I think, a previous after action meeting, was having a certification process where street performers who wish to voluntarily go through a certification with the city would get some additional benefit. So whether it's a stand, a sign next to them, or something they can display indicating that they have been certified by the city of Salem, Corey checked, cleared, and they're safe if you want to interact with that person, get a picture with them. Not something we can require, but possibly something that we can provide as a way to help people weed out folks who are I say bad actors and good actors, but that's probably not appropriate. Performance zones were topics that had come up just before COVID as a potential way to manage street performances. Because of the pandemic, they were never really fully implemented. We're taking a look at possibly looking at exploring them again. So this is the idea of designating a particular area as being only available for the scheduled street performances that the city's programming a space for, just like a stage. That way we could limit it to approved acts, curate the kinds of the acts that are appearing there. We're still working on identifying where that location might be, what weekend we might do that this year. And if it's something that we find to be successful and constitutional, then it's something we would hope to replicate in the future years as well. And then the last thing around performance zones is related to amplification in general. lot of different ideas. A lot of them have some unintended consequences around some of the programs that we do want to try to promote because of the First Amendment, we're limited in our ability to just prohibit application broadly. But if we do have the ability to limit it within a time frame in an area, that might be allowable. So that's something that we are taking a look at. And as well as the decibel levels that are currently in the noise ordinance. That map is not user-friendly for officers conducting enforcement, and it's very inconsistent why one side of the yellow line and one side of the green line have two different levels when they're only a few feet apart. So the discussion is we just set one decibel level for the entire area to be consistent. It's just easier to enforce. And then my last point was talking about crowd diffusion. So the feedback in the resident survey was a lot about heavy crowds, particularly in the area of the pedestrian mall in Latin Park. So these are some of the strategies that we're talking about to help try to diffuse some of those crowds. We can't tell people not to come to Salem. I mean, we can tell people not to come to Salem, but they're still coming here. We can't prohibit people from coming to Salem, right? Like, we have freedom of movement, they're allowed to come, they're allowed to use the public ways. But we can have different strategies that help regulate even subconsciously where they're moving to. So scheduling the road closures is an important step in that process. If we have these certified street performers assigned to locations where we might be able to spread people out a bit more. We've talked a little bit about the common, but thinking about the distribution of where those things are on the common. And I don't think we can't not use the common, 8 acres, 9 acres of open space in our downtown. But thinking about where those things are located there and how we might be able to use them to better move people out of the congestion areas. The Derby Street corridor, we heard a lot of feedback from the businesses down there that they did not have a very strong October. Just anecdotally, being down there on October weekends, the crowds were a lot lighter. I think there's opportunities to work with the National Park Service, to work with the businesses down there, the available spaces and lots that we have, Charlotte Fortin Park, other opportunities to kind of get people thinking about moving beyond Front Street and Essex Street, coming down onto Derby Street. Because when we spread those crowds on Essex Street out, it'll feel like there's less people here, I think. I mentioned the performance zones. Those are also a strategy that can be used not only to elevate the quality of the performances and manage the noise of those performances, but also circulate the crowds better. So we do this actually on Halloween night at the stages. Those are effectively performance zones that cause people, if you see them, to move in a great circle with a spiral of just wandering and staring at each other and looking at the stages and going on to the next one. But the same idea can be used throughout the month at different locations where we are able to program, we know we want to go see this juggling act, it's at this location, and then a half hour later we're going to go see this magician, this location, and we can move people around. And the last strategy around crowd diffusion is related to physical changes. This involves crosswalk improvements, sidewalk extensions, temporary measures around areas to just create the capacity for crowds to be able to move safely. There's a lot of different topics that we can cover around that. I don't want to say that these are all things that are going to happen in this coming year, but they're definitely things that are on our radar. And there are changes to sidewalk projects that are going to happen on working with the PBS Museum around Brown Street, working with the downtown businesses around Washington Street, thinking about places where we can just get back a little space on the sidewalk for the crowds that we have. Charter Street is a place that concerns me greatly. Just the crowds that pack along the cemetery wall there, or the cemetery fence. And what can we do to possibly buy back a little bit more space so that people can access those areas without having to walk into traffic. So those are kind of, that was a lot to throw at you in a short period of time, but I want to be respectful of your time. Those are, I think, based on survey data, conversations with many of you, conversations with city departments in our own after action, and conversations with neighborhood associations. Really the feedback that we heard was around those three big things: those street performances and amplification, the size of walking tour groups and the number of them, and just the volume of crowds in those really congested areas.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with my first question here. This was a lot, a great It's also, and to back it up a little, I think the reason that we started these meetings last year was the first time is to really increase transparency. Basically for the revenues and expenses kind of started at that and then expanded as the conversation happened on council floor to public safety and traffic and parking and all of these topics that we went over tonight. So thank you to everyone, because I know that was a huge undertaking to put all of this together. It took us a long time to go through it, so I appreciate everybody's time taken as well. But the transparency is just excellent here. And I want to make sure that the transparency continues with these next steps and plans and ideas that you have. And I'm wondering, I guess, my question on that regard is there one owner, this was my question last year, is there one owner of this, or how do you foresee the transparency of these changes coming up so it's not October 1st and we learn about these programming zones, or we learn about public guide changes, or we learn about these items? How are we going to be kept abreast of these items?
So, I mean, we're certainly happy to provide regular updates about these things. A lot of these changes are going to require ordinance changes, so they'll come before you, or budget requests and appropriations will come before you for conversation. So, but outside that, like, my door is always open. Feel free to reach out. I try to keep, especially the councilors who are, the at-large councilors, the Ward 2 councilors, and folks who represent the downtown area where a lot of these changes are going to affect, but also the Derby Street area, which affects Ward 1. Make sure that you know that these things are, if they're in development, that you're aware that they're going to be happening. No one person owns all of this, and that's to bring it back to my original point. We meet monthly as a team to talk about all these things, to have coordination around them. If it's a sidewalk extension project, it may be being led by engineering or by traffic and parking, but it's something that is part of the larger plan around crowd management. We're thinking about performance zones that involves our licensing and legal departments, but it's also something that needs to have input from police around crowd management. So there's no one owner. I think it's a team effort, and I think that each individual element is owned by a specific department, depending on what it is. But I would say there's one person in charge of every single one of these things, besides me.
Okay. So thanks again to everyone for the information provided. I do definitely want to open this up to public comment. We are a little over the 2-hour mark, so public comment, if anybody would like to make public comment here in the room, you can make your way to the podium. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record. I don't know if we have enough time for necessarily full Q&A back and forth, but if there are any questions that arise during public comment, we can make those. Feel free to make your way to the podium. Sorry. We just have one microphone this evening for the public.
So I have two points about data that I think is missing. For the chief, I didn't see arrest data for the month, and I think that's an important consideration. The other thing is, I think the impact on the Salem Hospital ER is important data for us to understand. And finally, I will just say, I think that we seem to have some community amnesia here. We've stopped haunted happenings at midnight on the 31st. I have my South Salem hat on. We had a murder at 1:15 on a street in South Salem. A student from Salem State was murdered with a handgun by another resident of Salem. I think that we can talk about the shoulder occurrences of haunted happenings, but we need to talk about the realities. We had a murder on our streets. I think that conceivably, from my view, haunted happenings on October 31st is a distraction from our community commitment to our public safety. And I would really like to understand where the community impact unit was in terms of their having an understanding of what's going on in our neighborhoods and conceivably being able to have their ears to the ground to prevent this kind of thing from ever happening again. This was, in my mind, the worst possible thing for us to have here in Salem, barring disasters, why we paint down the utility place in the street. But we as a community own this. And I think to just brush it off and not talk about it is appalling. Thank you.
Chief, would you like to? I see you getting up. So. Thank you.
Arrest data, I did not bring arrest data, but they do go up for October for all our happenings. In terms of the homicide, that homicide had nothing to do with the 100 happenings. I think because of the ongoing court case, I'm not going to comment on the specifics of it, but I have made comments in the past about it, as well as the district attorney. I'm, of course, happy to inform Salem about that homicide, but it doesn't have anything to do with proceedings tonight.
Thank you, Chief. Any other public comments from those in the room? Yep, feel free to make your way to the podium. I'm sorry, we only have one microphone and we'd like to definitely hear your comments and feedback. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record, you're welcome to do so.
So I'm Giovanni Albiso. I think a lot of people in the room already know me, Salem Historical Tours. So one thing I do want to clarify, we kept on saying on the direct expenses, but they were 64,000 and it was 84. So, but that's the number that gets thrown around a lot. But there's 1.4 million that we saw in occupancy taxes and also meal taxes. So when we throw around that 84,000 on direct, that's what everybody hears in the city, and they're not seeing that, and that's only October. So, but, and then the other thing I had a question on, I think it's for Dave, maybe, but the ticket and tax, the tickets in the towing, where, does that go into the general fund, or does it go earmarked for a certain budget? Oh.
General funds.
General fund, okay, cool, thank you.
Thank you. And also, if anyone in the audience would like to make a comment, we can bring the microphone to it if needed. Oh, Ed, sorry, and if you'd like to address that, sure.
Just to provide some clarity for folks that may not be super familiar with the city's budget, so the meals and rooms excise taxes, those are general fund revenues. Those are supporting the city's annual budget appropriation. So what you see for collections there, that's supporting the almost $200 million annual city budget. So it's not just sort of happenings directed revenue, but it's contributing to supporting the annual budget overall. And so when we look at those direct expenses, it would sort of show kind of the profit. It's not really a profit, but it's the gap between the expenses and the revenues. That's sort of really directly related to kind of specific fees that are paid, related to things that are occurring, directly related to happenings. But when we talk about meals and excise revenue, and parking revenue, as well as the general fund, and a few of those other revenues we discussed, they're supporting just the underlying basic police, fire, the budgets that the city has for just its day-to-day as well. And so those aren't just directly happenings related revenues, just so much of that.
Thank you. Shout out to our budget season coming up in May, June, hopefully May. Any other comments? I don't know if we can take public comment via Zoom, so unfortunately we don't have speakers this evening, but can direct any questions to the committee. Anyone else? So shy this evening. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Oh, Councilor Berlin.
Thank you, Chair. Before I make the motion, I just want to thank the mayor, our department heads, city staff, and more importantly, our residents for being here tonight. I think that this ongoing conversation is really about making this process more transparent, so we appreciate it, the feedback. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that this matter remain in committee. And we will receive and file the presentation as well.
Councilor Berlin made a motion for the matter to receive and file the presentation and for the matter to remain in committee. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Varela. All those in favor? I'm sorry, Councilor Harvey. Motion made by Varela, seconded by Councilor Harvey. All in favor? Motion carries. Is there a second motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made by Councilor Varela. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you again very much. Very informative.